Hello everyone and welcome. Today's webinar is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email to view the recording within 24 hours. If you have any questions, please submit them using the questions section of the control panel. We will cover as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. Now, I'd like to introduce Peter McKee from Docker and Jim Armstrong from Snyk.
Hello, everybody. This is Peter McKee from Docker speaking. I am on the developer relations team. Glad to have you here. I wanted to see if we got a bunch of people on the call, but before we kind of kick off, it'd be great if, while maybe I'm talking a little bit, if you guys could throw where you're at, what part of the world you're at, maybe what city, or it'd be great to see where everybody's from. I'm in Austin, Texas, and we have Jim Armstrong on the webinar with us from Snyk. Hey, Jim, can you tell everybody about yourself?
Yeah. So great to have everybody here. I see loads of people still joining us, so it's exciting to see folks interested in this topic. So as Peter said, I work for Snyk. I used to work at Docker with Peter, so really excited about this partnership and getting to work with loads of folks at Docker again as we build these products together. And I'm based in Dallas, so just up the street a ways from you there, Peter.
Yeah, good old Texas. Got a couple Texas boys on. I like that. Double dynamic duo from Texas, maybe?
That's right, yeah.
I'm seeing we got people from Gary's from Ohio, Toledo. I've been to Toledo. I took a
see Oregon.
Yeah, in Oregon, London. Hey, Richard, Germany. Awesome. All right. Oh, good. So let's get started here. Let's get going. So why integrate Docker and Snyk? So at Docker, we're really focused on developers and developer productivity, building tools and frameworks to help developers use containers and go from code to cloud. And one of the biggest requests we've been getting on the roadmap is for security and scanning your images, container vulnerabilities. Just a quick note, quick shout out. If you, after this call or now, if you have any features known, not only for security or anything just for Docker, head over to our roadmap. It's public. It's on GitHub. So if you go to github.com/docker/roadmap, and I'll put that link in the chat. And feel free to read through all the issues and what's on our roadmap and add any features you would like to see. Also, +1, a lot of the features that are currently in there that you want to see bump to the top and us address quicker. But yeah, so security was one of the highest features that was being asked of Docker. So we partnered up with Snyk to help us deliver some of those key features into the CLI. And so Jim is here. Jim's going to tell us a little bit more about Snyk and what they're all about.
Yeah, I think the common theme there is that developer focus. So Snyk is a security company, so that was one aspect certainly that's important here, is having that deep security information and having the security researchers. But the other aspect of it was that Snyk's DNA is on the developer side as well. We started with an open source security product to help people, scan their open source dependencies and fix those, and then we added Snyk Container. Again, the idea is not just showing you a report of what vulnerabilities are in a container, but from a developer's perspective, how do you go about fixing those vulnerabilities? Because you have this report now, what do you do with that information? In fact, Snyk, SNYK, stands for, so now you know, the idea there being, you get this report, so now you know, what do you do to actually take care of those vulnerabilities? And particularly if you're a developer who maybe is not an operating system expert in getting into some of those details. Yeah, that was why I think both organizations wanted to partner up on this, is that developer first mindset.
Yeah, for sure. And we had a webinar a couple of weeks ago where we kind of showed a preview of scanning using the Docker CLI. And it really is as simple as Docker run. It's a Docker scan. And again, if you want to see more of that, we're going to go through some of those commands today. But if you want a little more in-depth webinar, we have one. Jim and I did one 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's posted up on our YouTube channel. So our YouTube channel is youtube.com/Docker Run, 2 R's. Yeah, so go check it out. You can watch it at your leisure up there.
Yeah, a little shout out for SneakCon next week too. So Justin from Docker is doing a presentation with Danielle, who's one of our product managers. And again, they're going to be showing next week at SneakCon, which is free for everybody to attend. But you can see them do a deep dive on that, on the Docker desktop and Docker Hub as well. So lots of great stuff coming next week too.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, and so this phase that we wanted to show everybody today was Snyk integrated into Docker Hub. And we're going to go into the details in a minute, but we've made scanning your image with Hub as simple as Docker push. So once Snyk scanning is enabled in Hub, you can do a Docker push on your image, and it'll be scanned in Hub, and you'll be able to see your results. Let me jump over to Hub real quick. Let me show some of that. Let me log in. Where's my mouse? There it is. And I'm going to go to my favorite organization called Stark Technologies. And the way, let me kind of set up the way kind of Stark Technologies works, and it'll play into a little bit later as we go through some scenarios. But we have two major teams, hypothetically speaking, that we have a DevOps team that manages some of our internal base images. So if you see here, so we have a Node image, we have a Mongo image, and we have an Nginx image. These are all maintained by that DevOps team. They're in charge of making sure these are has all the tools that our developer needs. Let's say for a Node engineers, they have the Node tools that they need, and anything else they kind of need to do their job. And the DevOps team handles these images and pushes to them, updates them, those type of things. And then we have the development teams that are in charge of our application images. So you'll see target tracking and a heads-up display. This is the real code that's run inside the Iron Man suit. It's not, just kidding. So anyways, so the development team is in charge of building the application images. And the way you do that in Hub, there's various different ways, but the way we do it is you come over here to organizations, and I'll come into Stark Technologies, and there's a teams tab. So you're able to create teams. And then once you have teams, you're able to add people to them, so you can add a member. But what I wanted to show you here is we're looking at the development team. Once you set up your teams, then you can assign permissions to repositories. So as you can see here, let me make this a little bit bigger for folks. So down here at the bottom, you can see target tracking, which is our application for target tracking. And again, you can see the team name is up here, development. And they have admin rights to that image. And you can see what admin rights, what privileges you get with admin. So you can pull, push, view, edit, delete a repository. You can edit this build settings. You can update this description. Basically, you can manage that whole repository. Then if you look at the heads up display, they only have read write. And the reason I put read write there is I just want to be able to show the other privileges you have with read write. So you have pull, push, and you can view the repository, and you can trigger builds. You can view the builds, cancel builds, those type of things. So our development team only has access to the images that they use, that they work on. Not just use, I'm sorry, because they will use the base images, but the main images that they're in charge of that houses their application code. And so let's go back to the teams. And same thing, we have a DevOps team. If we take a look at their permissions, as you can see earlier that I said, the Node, the Nginx, and Mongo, they have admin rights. They're going to control those images. They're going to update those images. They're going to make sure that they're the best images for the development teams to use. So that's how we're set up here at Stark Technologies. Let me jump back to repositories. So we're taking a look at the repositories. You can see the list here. You can see some of them have scanning turned on by this little scanned label here. And then you can see others that are not turned on yet, so not being scanned. So let's take a look at Mongo here real quick. So this is just the general tab. And you can see right here, it says vulnerability scanning is disabled. So if you wanted to enable scanning for your repositories, come into that repository's details screen. You could click on enable here, or you can come up to settings, click on settings. Let me go back real quick. Enable takes you to settings. It's a quick shortcut. And then you can see here we can enable image scanning. So there we go. We have scanning on. And now next time we push, do a push into that repository, the scanning will kick off and show you the results. Let's jump in here real quick. So now that we have scanning turned on for all of our images, we could take a look at the base image and take a look at its vulnerabilities. So we can see, oh, we got a bunch of vulnerabilities. So before we do that, before we start taking a look at detailed vulnerabilities, how you fix those vulnerabilities, those type of things in the two different roles. So as a developer or as a DevOps, let me jump back to my slides. Let me kind of just walk you through a couple scenarios. So two main scenarios that we see out there in the wild, and there's variations of these, but these are the two main scenarios. So this first scenario we're looking at is the developer scenario. Your development team owns all your images, owns building, writing code, building the images, pushing them in the hub, and getting them into production, right? So either through a CI/CD, something like that, or manually. And so they start out, they're making changes, writing code, they're gonna build their container image locally, and then they're gonna do a Docker scan. And we're gonna take a look at this in a minute. But they're gonna scan the image, they're gonna fix issues, and then finally they're gonna push that image up the hub, and the scan will run again. So that's one scenario where you have a development team owns end-to-end. They own the application code, they own the base images. The second scenario is a little bit more complex, not super complex, but we see this a lot. A lot of Snyk's customers have this scenario, and a lot of our developers also. So, and this is really around the teams, and I think this is where Hub really comes into play. It allows team members not to every time they want to see security vulnerabilities, they'd have to scan the image locally to see all the vulnerabilities. Now they could just go in the hub. But so two main roles in this kind of workflow, and we're going to call it a DevOps lead. It could be that don't get too hung up on the title, of course. It could be a team within the security team that handles all the base images. But that DevOps team is in charge of just that, all the base images. And you can see right here, they select the appropriate base image based on language, framework, and what tools you need. And then they're going to add those tools in. They're going to remove stuff out of the image that doesn't need to be there. And then they're going to scan, make sure the image is fine. They're going to fix any vulnerabilities. And if everything's good, they're going to push up into Hub. And they're going to Slack the dev team, right? And say, you're good to go. And depending on how you're using tagging, right? The developers will always know when there's a new tag and which tag to use and those type of things. And then the other side on this right side of this screen is the developer. And it's the same kind of scenario I talked before, but the developer's only worried about their application code. So they're going to select the appropriate base image based on the DevOps lead has created. And then they're going to add in their custom tools and application packages. And then they're going to run locally and scan that image. And they're only going to be really concerned about what vulnerabilities have they added into the image, right? And they're going to fix those. Once those are all fixed, then they'll push the hub and kick off their CI/CD. So those are the two main scenarios. Let's go back into Hub where, there we go. Let me pause there for a minute. Let me. I've been speaking a lot. Jim, do you have any color to add to that? Sorry, I've just been rolling through that.
Yeah, no worries. I think you did a good job of sort of setting up the scenarios. I think the idea there is, in one instance, you may be just responsible for everything. You may have the freedom to choose whatever base images you want and just add anything you want, but you're responsible for the security of the entire container. In a lot of shops, what we see is people get to this idea of, we want to have kind of our core set of base images that we build things off of. That way it's not just the Wild West. We have some idea of what's going to be running later on in production. And so there are some people, generally a smaller set of people, who are responsible for maintaining that. And then as a developer for the application end of things, you really only need to worry about the things you add on top of that container. So containers are built in layers, right? And it's just sort of dividing the responsibilities up based on who's responsible for those different layers. So that's very common as well. In fact, we see customers who go even further. There's like 3 teams, right? So now we got a base, we've got middleware, we've got the actual application code. It can get as complex as you want it, I suspect, but getting it to 2 is general enough, I think, to apply to a lot of situations. But yeah, extremely common.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, so I'm back here in Hub. And again, let me go back onto the main page. So I'm here on my repositories page, and let's take a look at this node. The application we're going to be talking today is written in Node. So Node as a developer is the Snyk Technologies node image is my base image that I'm going to be using. So in this first scenario, we want to focus today more on that team, right? You have a DevOps team that's managing the base images, and then you have developers that are managing application code. Again, if you want to learn more about just the dev and handling everything, the scenarios and the remediation kind of steps that we're going to go through, you'll do for both, right? You'll do for your base images if you're creating one, and you'll do for your application code, or you might do them all together, right? So they're definitely the same, but we're kind of split them up a little bit here to give kind of more of a real world scenario. So with that said, I'm looking at my node. I have my DevOps hat on now. I'm in charge of managing and maintaining this Snyk Technologies node image that all of our 30,000 developers are going to use, right? And so I come in here and I can see, okay, it's scanned. Let's take a look. And I can say, oh, geez, I got a bunch of vulnerabilities, right? I got 237 high severity vulnerabilities. A couple ways you can get in to see the vulnerabilities is you click right here on the vulnerabilities, and that'll take you into the vulnerabilities screen directly. And here they are. Let me go back. Another way is if you're looking at your tags, you have your list of tags, and again, you can see vulnerabilities here, or you could just go into the tag. So I'm going to stick with 12.18.4. And then you need to click on the vulnerabilities tab. So you can see we got a bunch of stuff going on here. Let me hit the high levels, and I'm gonna use Jim as my security consultant specialist to help me work through fixing some of this stuff. So you can see I pushed it about an hour ago. I have 237 high vulnerabilities, 229 medium, and 4,423 low. Jim, I know you're gonna help me out with that. And then you can see a total here of how many vulnerabilities. Then we scroll down a little bit. This is where you get a list of your vulnerabilities. They're ordered from high severity to medium to low. So if you wanted to see the low, you can jump all the way to the end, standard kind of table and, paging. So let me jump back to the beginning. So I see a bunch of them here, Jim. This is making me nervous. Let me expand this and, okay. So this is a dependency tree, it looks like. Yep. So I've got my bzip2. All right, what do I do here? What am I looking at, Jim?
Yeah, so essentially what you're getting there is the relation from a particular vulnerability, which might be in a library buried somewhere deep inside of something else you installed, and getting back up to the top level package. So this one is, I can tell it's a Debian image. It's got dpackage in there, which is part of the package management system there. But it is that being there introduced bzip, which is a dependency for dpackage. And so that's where the vulnerability in this case comes from. Now, is that information all super necessary? Sometimes, because as a developer, you want to, and as a DevOps team and as a security team, it's sometimes useful to know what the package is, although I don't know that, most of us are going to spend time, particularly with an image like this, where you've got 1,000 vulnerabilities or so. We're not going to go through each one and try and figure out all of those details. And we'll take a look, I know, in the demo here in a second, and how we can kind of get to a fix much quicker. But what is relevant here is thinking about, what does this vulnerability mean? Is this something that should exist in this container at all? Particularly for production. Maybe it's okay in development. Like I would need a package manager in development because I probably am going to be installing some extra stuff into the container for testing and building purposes and all that kind of stuff. And I need package management to be able to do some of those things. So that's great. If this was a container going to production, I might change that answer. I might not want dpackage in there, or any package manager for that matter, because why should people be installing new packages in a production container, right? So getting back to the high level tool that's causing this vulnerability, I think is really important when it comes to sort of making that contextual analysis. The other interesting thing here too, I'll point out, you notice there's a fixed in column, and none of these have a fix available. And I do want to point out here, you know, the idea in this workflow is that you've got a team who's building the internal kind of base image. They're still going to Docker Hub and getting Node in this case, right? And Docker does a good job of maintaining those Node images. So the fact that there's a bunch of vulnerabilities here is important to note. We'll talk about how to get that reduced very significantly. But the other side of it is part of that maintenance that goes into this is making sure that anything that can be fixed does get fixed, right? That's one of the things I think people rely on Docker to do. It's why people use those official images from Docker, because they know, you know, tomorrow if one of these vulnerabilities is fixed, there's going to be a new node-based image. And the idea of this sort of split workflow inside an organization is that you've got one team who's just focused on that aspect of it. As soon as there's a new node image from Docker, I'm going to rebuild my internal node images, and then that's going to kick off a chain of, you know, builds for everything else that's dependent on that that internal node image that I've got. So all of those details are important. If this were an older image, or if it was an image that was not well maintained, you'd start to see that fixed column be filled up very quickly. But if you're pulling things like Docker official images, you probably, you know, most of those things are going to be fixed pretty quickly. So, you know,
I think in the Mongo, take a look at my latest here and go into vulnerabilities. No, I'm wrong. I thought I saw it yesterday. Sorry, false alarm. Thought I saw some fixed in. So coming back here, jump in. Okay, so perfect. So I'm gonna go. I need to fix this, right? We got 4,000 vulnerabilities, and like Jim said, you know, not necessarily, you know, alarm, right? It's the quality of the you know, the severity of the vulnerability and why it's there, and will you keep it into later images? So I'm gonna jump back to my terminal, and I've pulled down the repo that we manage the node-based image in. All that's in there is a Docker file. Right, and so I have the image already. So I'm going to scan that image, and I'm just going to do here at this point. I'm just going to run a basic scan just to see all the vulnerabilities. But what I'm also going to do is you can add in the Docker file, so I can tell it, hey, while you're scanning this, look at my Docker file and glean as much information from what I'm doing in my Docker file and from what you see in the actual image. So I'm going to add that now. So I'm going to do Docker file. And then I'm going to give it the name of the image. So start technologies, and we are doing node 12.18.4. Let's go ahead and run that. So that's going to run. Just a quick note on Docker scan, you can do a -- login that will log you into Snyk's engine, their site. You can log in with your Docker ID. When you log into, when you do that and log in, you get more scans on the CLI than just without logging in. So I highly recommend do a -- login. That'll open up a browser tab for you. You can use your Docker ID, free account, and you'll get more scans monthly. But so now it looks like it's querying the database. Hopefully I went out earlier and kicked all my kids off my internet connection. It's lunchtime. They were eating sandwiches, but I said if anybody gets on to play Doom or anything, they're all grounded. But no. So, okay. So there we go. Okay. Let me kick it over to you, Jim. Tell me what I'm looking at here.
Yeah, so we got the vulnerability report. Again, the same vulnerabilities that we saw in the hub UI are here, but as now at the development end, right? I've got to fix this container. And this is particularly, we're talking about the first part of that workflow where we're going to adjust our internal base image. And we're very interested in the base image that we inherited, which is a Docker official image. But in this case, you can see at the bottom there, that base image has, in and of itself, it has 500 vulnerabilities in it, 53 of which are high severity. And so, we looked at, when we were looking at the dependency tree, one of the things we were kind of discussing and philosophizing about is, do we need all of those packages in there? Well, there's like, if you go to the node repository on Hub, there's tons of actual images in there, right? And some are much thicker. The nice thing about those sort of fatter images is they probably have everything you could possibly want to build a node application. So they're gonna be very simple to use. The flip side of that is they're gonna light up vulnerabilities reports because there's just tons of libraries in there, and there may be bunches of them that you don't need and you never use and never touch. And so, how do you determine which of those are important and which aren't? I think it's a little bit easier if you start with a slimmer base image. And that's one of the, the sort of the principles of building containers anyway, is to start with a slimmer base image. So what you see below that is recommendations that the Snyk Snyk container engine provides on how to get to those, better base images. So we could go to node 1413, you see that'll knock off a whopping three vulnerabilities for us. But even bigger than that, we can go to the slimmer images, right? Now the slimmer image, we remove a bunch of development dependencies and we remove a bunch of extra packages that maybe you need, maybe you don't, right? That's how you get down to so fewer vulnerabilities. That's probably not English, but it's close enough.
I'm following.
Yeah, but that's how you get that number so low. And as a node developer, then you may have to figure out, okay, well, I'm going to need to add some packages back so that I can actually, build my dependencies and get my application to run. But if you think about the whole life cycle again, right, as a developer, you can pretty quickly figure out which packages you need. You can add those to the Docker file. You can, in your development scenarios, you start thinking about multi-stage builds. Your development scenarios, you'll have all those packages there. You build your application. Then your final application, you can be very surgical about removing those. And you know exactly what you've added to the container. So when you do get vulnerability reports, well, I added that because I had to. It's required for my dependencies, or it's required for the way my node application is configured. But when I get to production, I don't need them because I've already built everything. And when I get to that final, that final stage of my multi-stage build, I can remove those things and I don't need them anymore. So I think by, again, a bit philosophical here, but getting that slim image, it reduces the vulnerabilities. That's good from a security standpoint. But again, you're being very specific about what goes into that container. And that, again, not just having a small container is one of the tenets of good practices for building containers, but only putting things into the container that you need for your application is another one of those tenets. And so if you start with a slim image, you're going to be doing both of those things. And so I think, while those thicker images may be easier to start with, ultimately getting down to those slim images is much better. So over time, obviously, even if we switch to the node 1413 Buster Slim, there's going to be a change at some point. Tomorrow, there may be a vulnerability that gets fixed, and node 1413 Buster Slim tomorrow might be different. And if we did this scan tomorrow, it would show you, oh, by the way, this image, there's a newer version of node 1413 Buster Slim, and today it only has 50 vulnerabilities. So if you rebuild, you'll get down to 50. So all that's tracked by the Snyk container engine as well.
Awesome. I'm going to scroll up a little bit, see what we have in here. Here's all of our super high severities, telling me introduced in the base image, all that good stuff. Okay, so I think, Jim, I'm going to switch to use this Buster Slim.
Okay, good.
Because since it's and my thinking is managing this base image, like you said, is I don't need this big fat images here, 12.18.4 and 14.3. Like you said, it's going to have all kind of tools in there that I don't need. So let me hop over to the code. And so let's take a look at that Docker file. So I'm going to change my I'm going to use Buster Slim. Uh-oh. I think you just said don't add anything back in.
Well, yeah.
Probably shouldn't be doing that.
Right. I think it's okay when you're doing it because you have an explicit need to do so.
Oh.
But I think there's some good details when we do the vulnerability scan that come from that as well, right? Like if they're part of those, if those things were part of the base image, then what do you do? Like you've got to start, and Snyk will help you kind of pick a better base image, but they're baked into that base image. If you're surgically adding them, you can surgically remove them too. So,
right.
I might argue whether you need curl and nano in Vim inside a container, but but nonetheless, some
Right.
people like those things.
Okay, so I'm gonna let's build my image again. I'm gonna do a Docker build. I'm gonna hit start technologies. Why did I pick such a long name? And I'm gonna do node. Oh, I actually copied that. So we're gonna create our own base image based off of node. And again, don't worry about too much about my tagging. This is just the way I've chose to do it. You know, if you have your own convention, feel free to use that. So I'm gonna build this image. We're using build kit, so hopefully it'll be nice and quick here. And then after this builds, I'm gonna push that image up into Hub, and then we can take a look at the vulnerabilities again in Hub. All right, relatively quick. So I'm just gonna do a Docker push. There it goes. All right, come on. Okay, there we go. Usually my my upload speeds are definitely slower than my downloads. Okay, so let's hop over into Hub and take a look here. So let's go back in. Again, I'm just going back to show you the flow to how to get to see the vulnerabilities. So here on my repository list, I'm gonna click on node, Stark Technologies node. It's gonna go out and spin it away, and it's getting results for us. Scroll down to the bottom. So it's scanning right now. So we'll give that a minute. But to get in to see the vulnerabilities, you can click again here on each one of the images, or you can go into tags and see a list of your tags. You can filter. You can then select stuff and you can delete them. Basic things in Hub.
Yeah, I think you can see there too, like again, going back to this idea of using a slim image, you can see Hub showing the compressed size, but even at that, you can tell there's a vast difference in Buster Slim versus regular node.
Yes.
The compressed size, right? And that again, that relates to all the things that go into those images. So, oh, there's your scan results too.
There we go. So now we have 46. Now we're down to 216. That makes me, my anxiety has just dropped massively. But again, same thing. Come in here, you can see all your, you can see your scan results. You can tab through. And then, like Jim was describing earlier, you can you know, figure out what you want to remove, what you don't want to remove. Here's Vim. Maybe we don't need Vim. Let's go all the way to the end here. See some of the lows. We're not too concerned about the lows. And you'll see here, it's nice. We only have 20 pages now, not 400. But yeah, so there's all your vulnerabilities. Again, just to recap real quickly, you see a dependency tree right here in the UI, so you can see, kind of track down. There's our curl. Track down where this vulnerability is kind of getting introduced.
Yep. Yeah, I think too, you know, what we showed in a couple of weeks ago too, you can get that dependency tree from the command line as well. So, you know, if you're at the command line doing the actual sort of troubleshooting work, there's an option, Docker scan is -- dependency tree, I think is what it is actually.
Yep.
That will show you that same sort of tree view. It's a little bit higher level, so it draws out kind of a pretty tree of the packages themselves, as opposed to the long list of vulnerabilities. But again, just helping you kind of figure out what's in that container, what things might you want to think about removing from the container, particularly as it moves towards production.
Awesome. Jim, I'm going to add in exclude the base.
Yep.
We can. And the reason I'm doing that is, well, I know that I put some editors into the base image, but exclude base will look at your Docker file and exclude your base image. So in this case, the Buster Slim. So it's only really going to focus on kind of what is in my Docker file and the image.
Yeah, and again, kind of as we start to think about the second half of that workflow, right? If you have somebody or a team whose responsibility it is, whether it's security or a DevOps team or whatever the case may be, their responsibility to maintain that base image, and you as the developer, just responsible for the layers you add. What's in that base image that's vulnerable, not up to you to fix, right? It's up to somebody else to handle those. So all you need to look at are the vulnerabilities that come from the things that you've added. And so you get that by doing the exclude base, right? And that's what you're seeing there. Yeah, and you get the Docker file command, right? Which tells you, in this case, it's a pretty simple Docker file. But you could have, long lists of run commands at multiple places in a Docker file. And so again, the dependencies are nice because you know exactly kind of what's in the container. But the Docker file is another good bit of information because it tells you where it came from, right? What step actually produced these things? And again, is it something I did or is it something that was in the base? So both of those views are useful for kind of deciding what you're going to fix and how you're going to fix it. And who's responsible for fixing it, for that matter, too, if you've got this workflow where it's kind of split amongst different teams.
Awesome. I'm going to jump back to that workflow real quick. Present. And so what we kind of did again is we were staying on this left-hand side of the flow, and we fixed some of our vulnerabilities, and now we're good to go. We're going to push this up in the hub, which we just did. And then any kind of mechanism that, communications that you want to do with your development team, or they're going to grab a new base. So I'm going to jump over, take off my DevOps hat, and I'm going to put on just my DevOps hat on. And I'm going to jump over into my application code. So this is the target tracking. And I know, DevOps had said, hey, we have a new base image out there for Node that everybody should start using. Please go update, right? And so I'm going to come over into my Docker file, and I'm going to add in 12.18.4. And it is, was it Buster Slim? I copied the wrong thing. Let me get the exact image, so I don't have to type out Stark Industries. Oh, it's not that one. It's this Node Buster Slim. Okay. So now I'm going to use not just the Node 12.18.4, I think it was. Did I get that right? All right.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm switching to the 14.3-Buster-Slim, the image that we just fixed. I'm going to use that as my base image. So now I'll save that. And not a whole, this is, as you can see, this Docker file is very base, very slim. So I didn't want to introduce too much and confuse people. It's just a very basic, slim Docker file. But I want to focus on this base image first. So I'll come into my terminal. And now that we updated that, I'm going to build the image. So I'm going to do a Docker build. I'm going to tag it. There's our target tracking. And let's give it 05. And let's run that build. Should be nice and fast. Okay, there we go. So now I just updated my image. I'm gonna run the scan local. Let me just clear screen. So Docker scan. And I'm gonna tell it to exclude base, because I'm the developer. I don't need to care. I don't care what's in the base image. I trust my DevOps folks, right? They've given me, they said, use this image. Make sure you keep all vulnerabilities out that you're going to introduce. So I'm going to focus back on just what I might have introduced. So exclude base, and I'm going to give it the file, Docker file, and Stark in technologies. There we go. And mine is the target tracking. And I think I did what, 105? We'll see.
Yeah, I remember.
It would have gave me an error. Okay, same thing here. It's grabbing dependencies, going to go out to the vulnerabilities database. And there we go. All right, Jim, what am I looking at here?
Yep. So in this case, you've actually got two different sets of reports. So sort of two projects, if you will. One is the code. That's the piece at the bottom. So actually we found that package JSON inside the container and did a scan on that. And you know, there's one thing you could upgrade. It doesn't really introduce any vulnerabilities. We'll kind of ignore that for now. You scroll up a little bit, you've got the actual image vulnerabilities. And here you can see you've done a fantastic job. You're down to 4 vulnerabilities that you've introduced yourself in here. Again, you've got the Docker file command. You know exactly where they come from as you were building that image. And so you can see what's there. And again, you've got the sort of the dependency tree as well. You can see that the ones we're seeing here on screen are related to Vim. You know, if you're still, you know, this is a target, here is prod. So probably we want to get rid of Vim in our prod environments. We probably want to adjust how we build this image.
Okay.
But, you know, we could, if we, for some odd reason, need Vim in production, we could, I guess, look at it differently. I guess it depends on the use case for this particular image, but
I would say no. I think now that I remember back, I was trying to fix something local, so I wanted an editor inside my container, and yeah, I should get rid of that. So I'm gonna pull that out, save it. Let's do another build here real quick, and I'm gonna tick this. And like Jim mentioned earlier, you can see I'm targeting prod, right? But a good highlight. Let me show real quick. So in that scenario, I was talking about adding in an editor so I can use it inside of my container. When you're developing locally, sometimes if you want to troubleshoot and you're trying to fix something or you just want to read something, there are various different ways you can do it. So you might need an editor inside, all right? But you really shouldn't put it in your base. Here you can see I'm setting up multi-stage builds using build kit. And if you look at production, is based off of the base, right? And so what this does is from base as prod, it's going to label this as prod. And when I did a -- target, that's what I'm targeting. And I'm creating this final image from base. And so up here we can see I labeled this first layer, this first stage as base. So it's going to include everything that I build in here. So what I could have done is actually probably should have moved my editor down into the dev, right? Yeah. So when I build, so when I'm working locally, I'm building that, I'm targeting dev, and there, it'll put the nano in there for me in Vim. But when I target when I target prod, those will not be included in my image. Just wanted to highlight that real quick. The Jim talked about it earlier. Doing multi-stage builds where you might want to do all of your compilations and a lot of your dev tools that you need to build an image in an earlier stage, and then in a subsequent stage, you want to pull those tools back out and just add the files that you need. Don't want to go too in depth of that here, but I definitely wanted to mention it because it plays into the security vulnerabilities that you might add in your image and how you want to remove them with multi-stage builds.
Yeah,
okay.
I think
go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's a great point. I think there's lots of ways to look at base images too, right? So you might use one of those thicker base images for development, but when you get to prod, it depends on the code. With Node, you probably wouldn't use Scratch unless you're a glutton for punishment, but maybe maybe you do. But there are certain use cases where you might use Scratch. Then you wouldn't have anything, right, in the container except for whatever you explicitly copy in there. Like if it was a C program or a Go program or something, that might be a great use case for having Scratch in your production container base.
Right.
You probably still wouldn't use Scratch as your development base. You'd want tools and code and other things in there to be able to mess around with it. But yeah, great example.
Awesome. Okay, so I saved that. Let's jump over and build this one more time. And is that the right one? Let's go to 7 because those are always our, we always release on odd numbers. Nope. What did I do? talking and not paying attention. Maybe it was just that fast.
Maybe everything was already cached or something.
Yeah, well, let's see. Let's do a Docker scan. Hello, geez. Target tracking 1.0.7, and let me add in exclude base, and I'm going to add the Docker file. Let's run the scan now. Give it a minute here. There we go. Uh-oh, what did I do?
Yeah, we've built something not quite right.
Whoops. I'm going to take this out. Oh. Oh, you know what? Those might be getting pulled. Huh. Well, that's interesting.
Maybe no cache. Maybe it's using cache when it shouldn't.
Yeah. There we go. Get a list of images. I'm going to push that image. Target tracking 0.8.
Yeah, another good example of using the smaller image there too, right? So you've got your node base image, the one we started with, which is 968 megs. Now we've got our final target tracking image that has all the node stuff built in it, and still it's only 263 megs. So again, another reason why the vulnerabilities go down so much.
Yep. Yeah.
But I think one of the key points there too is a lot of times the vulnerability details can be a little overwhelming, right? Like it's in that hub view, there's a little icon off to the right. And if you want to get into the vulnerability details specifically, you can, right? And that'll take you over to Snyk and our vulnerability report. And then from there, you can go to CVEs and wherever you want to go, right? To the distribution specific reports and on down those rabbit holes. But a lot of times that stuff from a development perspective is not as important. It's more to the point, how do I get rid of these things, right? I don't really care about what Ubuntu says about this vulnerability. What I care about is, can I get it out of my container? Should I get it out of my container? Should I worry about it? And I think that's really to the point of what we're trying to build here is that view of, yes, all the vulnerability details are there. If you want to get into them, you certainly can. But more to the point, how do we start getting rid of these things? Can I get a better base image? That will usually take care of a bunch of things. And then, being a little bit more surgical about what we add to a container and can remove from a container as we start to layer on top of that.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so you can see, let me scroll up a little bit, get in closer in the screen, make this bigger. So here I am back in our repository, just on the general tab where I'm seeing the top of my scans, my latest tags, sorry. And we can see here 108, now we're down to 46 high severity, 13 medium, 157 low. We've gone way down from 237 based all on our base image, right? And then we can come over here again, see the details, click on either the right in the tag, or you can go up into the tags tab and then come into choose your tag and then come into vulnerabilities. But here again, you can see all the vulnerabilities. You can tab through them. You can see the hierarchy chain, the dependency chain. But there we go. So I'm good with the 46. We removed everything out of, we updated our base image, we removed our editors, right? And now I can push this, trigger this into my CI/CD, launch it into production, and feel pretty confident that the severities or the vulnerabilities that are in there are not an issue, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Anything to add to that, Jim, before I kind of go on? Just jump back to this screen in case we want to give a little color.
Yeah, again, I think, you know, you start, you know, as you get into this, I would say the thing is to start with the higher level view, right? Base images tend to be the biggest bang for your buck. Choosing a better or slimmer base image is going to be where you can have the biggest, most dramatic effect on reducing vulnerabilities. And, you know, to that end, like we said before, too, Docker official images are well maintained, so it's a great place to start. There may be vulnerabilities in them, but those generally you're speaking are they're not fixable vulnerabilities. As soon as they are fixable and there's a fix available, Docker pushes a new image, right? So those things are constantly maintained as soon as there's something there to fix it. But the other side of that is making them usable to a developer, right? I mean, we could remove everything. We could get down to scratch and start building, you know, building from bare bones. Right. But that's not a maintainable process for most environments, most organizations. So you got to start somewhere, and there's a bit of a trade-off there.
Right.
But those, again, are those vulnerabilities actually dangerous in your environment and those kinds of things? That's another set of things. But then, you know, once you get the base image, then you start looking at things that you add to that container and deciding, okay, this is for development. It's okay. I've got Vim and Nano and curl and things. When I go to production, I'm not going to have those things in my container. So yes, I see those vulnerabilities. If there's something that's a particularly high severity, I'll rebuild and get a new version of Vim or whatever. But when I go to production, I'll make sure I get those removed as well. So I, start at that level. If you want to continue from there, those rest of those vulnerabilities make you nervous. There are ways you can go about it, right? I think, again, you can start looking at slimmer images, even than those, and being extremely surgical about what goes in there. There's loads of interesting projects out there that can get rid of the package managers and get rid of the shells and all those kinds of things from a container that will get rid of a lot of those vulnerabilities as well. So there's ways to get lower, but I'd say save that until you get the first patterns down.
I would agree. I think it's I always talk about when you're first coming to Docker, when you're building your images, get your application running in a container first, and then start slimming down. Kind of the same what Jim was just talking about with your security vulnerabilities. Start where you need, and then start slimming down and be strategic and have reasons why you're removing things out of the image, right? Sometimes if you just started with a very slim base image or scratch and you just find a whole bunch of problems trying to add things in, you have to become almost a Linux distro maintainer, right? If you're going from scratch, it's not fun. But yeah, awesome. So let me jump to the next slide. So that's all we really have for today. In a minute, I'm gonna jump over to questions, see if we can answer some questions here last 5 minutes. But like Jim mentioned earlier, next week is SnykCon. It's free. Please go sign up. Justin Cormack from Docker and Danielle Inbar from Snyk are going to give a talk. Check out their talk. Justin is fantastic. Danielle is fantastic. It's going to be a great talk. And then you also, our CEO, Scott Johnson, will be on. I believe in the keynote, or maybe that's changed. But yep, awesome.
Yep, it'll be in the keynote. Yeah, so that's going to be great. There's probably some folks that are familiar with Gareth Rushgrove. He used to be at Docker as well, and he's given lots of talks in the community. He works at Snyk, but he'll be doing a presentation. If you're really interested in like that whole process side of things, like, okay, great, I see how I can use Docker to do the scanning, but what's the actual people process side of that? He's got a great talk on how to actually do that. And then we've got some customers who will be talking about their own personal process and what they're doing with container security too. So lots of great sessions there, not just in container security, but code security and loads of great speakers from all over the place. So yeah, I would love to see folks there. Again, it's free. Come to whatever sessions pique your interest.
Awesome. So real quick, I'm just reading through the questions. Some folks asked, I did on the command line, I did a Docker space scan, and it's telling me it's not a valid command. Right now, the CLI is in on the Edge channel. So if you go to docker.com into products, download the Edge desktop, and that's where you'll see Docker scan. On the Hub side, that's live right now. So if you go to Hub, you can have scanning there available right now in Hub. The CLI will be released very soon, early November, I believe November 2nd. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, for stable. So everybody.
Correct. Yes. All right, just reading down things here. Is this available from a local hub? My company does not allow me to connect to Docker Hub. So correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, you can still, if you have the Edge version, you can still scan your images locally.
Yep.
That'll talk to the Snyk container vulnerability engine, and you can do that locally, right, on the command line.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely ways we can support, that. So you can use Docker Desktop no matter what, and do your scans locally. But we can set up Snyk as well to scan. It doesn't really make a difference what registry you use. We can set up those scans and produce very similar types of information that you would see in Hub, just directly from Snyk. Yep.
And Randy, you should talk to your management chain and have them give you access to Hub.
There you go.
Okay, we probably take one more quick one here. Okay, this is from Kent. Thanks, Kent. Let me move my microphone. When Snyk scans the container that was built from a base, if the base image ignored a scan result because they felt it was unnecessary to fix, will it show up in the scan of the image, which is base plus application code?
Yeah.
Yes, it will. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, there's some really interesting. This is really kind of to the heart of what Gareth's talk is going to be next week at SnyKCon, is this idea of this multi-team workflow, and not just like we talked about excluding base image vulns, which is one way of ignoring them, I guess, but you can also use actual ignores. Like with vulnerabilities, you have an ignore and you put in a reason why you're ignoring them, and it gets audited, all those kinds of things, right? So that could be part of your workflow as well. But I think to that question specifically, if one team decides to ignore and you're just sort of inheriting what they do, can you pick up that ignore automatically as well? There are ways to do that. So I would highly encourage you to, again, just register for SnyKCon. Gareth's talk is on the second day. I can't remember. I don't know my days of the weeks anymore, but it's either Tuesday or Wednesday, I think, of next week. But you'll find the schedule there. Just go to that link and you'll find the schedule. Gareth Rushgrove is giving that talk. Patterns for secure base image management, and he will address that question very specifically, and any kind of workflow you can sort of dream up.
Yeah, 100%. Gareth's brilliant. Sure, it's gonna be a great talk. Yeah, cool. Well, I think that's it. But yes, Markley, don't add Nano and Vim into your images either. Thank you. Sometimes when you're doing demonstrations, you have to do some stupid stuff to demonstrate things. But great.
How often those end up in images.
Yeah. And I shouldn't say stupid. I shouldn't say that. I didn't mean that, right? As you go further along in your containerization journey, right, you understand those a little bit more and understand how images and containers work. But so sorry if I offended anybody if you have Vim or Nano in your images. I did not mean to, but awesome. Well, I really appreciate everybody joining. Shortly after this, you should get an email with a replay link in case you didn't get to see all of it. I think some folks were mentioning they came in a little bit late. No problem. You'll get a link to the replay. Again, go to SnyKCon, sign up, check out all of the talks. You can also go to, let me put it into the chat right here. Hopefully it doesn't take out my URL. So yeah, please go check out our public roadmap. That is Docker's roadmap. We do use that. The PMs are in there all the time. That is what we are currently working on. And so if you have any new features you'd like to add in, please put them in there, and thumbs up the other features that you see in there. But again, thank you so much. Jim, any last parting words?
No, yeah, I think put what you want to see in the Docker roadmap. Both teams are working on the next phases of integration and what we can do. So really excited about that ongoing work. But of course, it's all based on what people want to see and do. So make sure you let us know.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you and see you on the next webinar. Have a great day.
Thanks.